Human freed the alien girl from a slave carriage only to learn she was their chosen oracle. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. It was a cold night in the bustling streets of the market district. The kind of night where the wind bites at your skin and the neon lights of distant stores flicker in the fog. Commander John Walker had seen his fair share of battles, but nothing quite like this. He was used to war zones, to the clashing of armies and the smoke of burning cities, but standing here, in front of a small, decrepit slave carriage, he felt a strange sense of unease. The clinking of chains echoed through the alley, mingling with the soft whispers of the crowd as they hurried by, avoiding eye contact. John's sharp gaze locked onto the carriage, its wooden frame weathered and worn from years of neglect. Inside, a figure stirred, her silhouette barely visible through the small window. She was shackled, her limbs bound by chains that seemed too tight, restricting her every movement. The crowd paid no attention to her, for she was just another commodity, another life for sale in a world that had long forgotten the value of empathy. John, however, couldn't turn away. The sight of her, her golden eyes staring back at him through the slats of the carriage, struck him like a bolt of lightning. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was her eyes, wide and filled with a deep sadness, or maybe it was the aura of quiet dignity she carried, despite her captivity. Whatever it was, he couldn't let it go. He approached the cart, his boots crunching softly against the cold pavement. The slaver, a grizzled alien with dark green skin, looked up from his card game. "You want her," the slaver sneered. "Only 20,000 credits, a bargain for a slave like her." John frowned. "I don't want a slave," he said, his voice low but firm. "I want her free." The slaver scoffed. "You think you can just buy her freedom? That's not how it works, human." But John was already pulling out his wallet, scanning the datapad for the necessary amount. He didn't know why he was doing this, he had no interest in taking on the responsibility of a stranger's life, but something about this woman made it impossible to ignore. The transaction was quick, almost too quick, as if the slaver was relieved to get rid of her. As soon as the credits transferred, the shackles were removed, and the woman stepped out of the carriage, her movements slow but graceful. She was tall, her skin a deep shade of violet, and her silver hair shimmered under the neon lights. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Why?" she asked, her voice soft but carrying a weight of centuries of experience. John didn't have an answer. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just couldn't leave you there." The woman studied him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she nodded, her eyes softening just slightly. "My name is Ariana," she said. "And you've just freed more than just a slave. You've released the Oracle of the Tan Dominion." John blinked in confusion. "Oracle," he repeated. She nodded, her gaze steady. "Yes, I am the chosen Oracle, destined to guide my people. And now that you've freed me, you will be tied to my fate in ways you cannot yet understand." John felt a chill run down his spine, though he had no idea what she meant by her words. He only knew one thing for certain, his life had just become far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. John stood still as Ariana's words sank in. The Oracle of the Tan Dominion. He glanced at her, trying to make sense of what she had just said. He had heard of oracles, but he had never imagined he would meet one, let alone free her from a life of captivity. His mind raced with 1,000 questions, but the most pressing one was what this all meant for him. Ariana's eyes, a striking shade of violet, held his gaze, and for a brief moment, John felt as though she could see straight through him. "I didn't expect this," John finally said, his voice tinged with confusion. "I thought I was just doing what any decent person would do, but now," he trailed off, unsure of what to say next. Ariana took a slow step closer to him, her movement graceful despite her past. "You've done more than just free me," she said, her voice soft yet firm. By releasing me, you've set in motion something far greater than either of us can fully comprehend. The fate of my people, and perhaps even yours, is now intertwined with mine. John's brow furrowed. I'm not a hero, Ariana. I'm just a man trying to get by. I don't want any part in some prophecy or destiny or whatever you're talking about. Ariana looked at him for a long moment, and then, with a soft sigh, she nodded. I understand your reluctance, she said. But you don't have a choice. The moment you freed me, you became part of the Tan Dominion's destiny. She paused, as if weighing her words carefully. There are forces at play here far beyond the reaches of my control. My people, my true people, believe in a prophecy, one that foretells the coming of a human who will aid us in reclaiming what was once ours. You, John, are that human. John felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The last thing he wanted was to be some pawn in a galactic prophecy. He was a simple man, trying to rebuild his life after years of war. He had no interest in politics, no interest in galactic empires, and no interest in being tied to the fate of some alien species. I didn't sign up for this, he said, his voice hardening. I just wanted to help you. I didn't ask for any of this. Ariana's expression softened, and for the first time since their meeting, she stepped closer to him, her presence warm. I know you didn't, John, she said gently. But fate has a way of choosing us, whether we like it or not. The Tan Dominion is on the brink of collapse. We are fighting an enemy that threatens to tear apart everything we hold dear. My people need a leader, a protector. And you are the one who has been chosen to guide us. John swallowed hard. The weight of her words pressed on him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his life, the simple life he had been trying to rebuild, was slipping through his fingers. I'm not a leader, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm just a man. A man who doesn't know anything about saving a whole species. Ariana looked at him with a strange mix of sadness and determination. You don't have to be perfect, John, she said. You don't have to know everything. You only need the strength to stand by those who need you. John was silent for a long moment, trying to process everything she had just said. He didn't want to be caught up in something so vast and unknown, but something in Ariana's eyes, something in the way she spoke, made him wonder if he had a choice. As the night deepened and the city around them grew quieter, John made his decision. He wouldn't walk away. Not from her. Not from this. The road ahead was uncertain, and the stakes were higher than anything he had ever faced, but he knew one thing for sure, he wasn't in this alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. As the days passed, John found himself growing more and more involved in the mysterious world that Ariana had introduced him to. Despite his reluctance, he couldn't shake the sense of responsibility that had settled over him. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized that her presence brought something out of him he hadn't known existed: strength, courage, and a willingness to fight for something greater than himself. They spent their days traveling together, sometimes through the bustling city streets and sometimes in the quiet solitude of the countryside, where the stars shone bright and the weight of their journey seemed lighter. Ariana had been patient with him, answering his questions as best as she could, but there were still so many things he didn't understand. The Tan Dominion, the prophecy, and most of all, his role in it all. As they sat in the small room of a safe house one evening, Ariana finally spoke again. You're beginning to see it, aren't you? She asked, her voice soft but filled with an intensity that made John's heart race. He looked at her, confused. See what? The path, she said simply. You are part of something much larger than yourself now. The moment you freed me, you became the catalyst. You might not know it yet, but you will. Led my people, John. I can feel it in my bones. John shook his head, still struggling to understand. I'm not a leader, Ariana. I'm just a man. I don't have the skills to lead anyone. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile. That's what you don't understand. It's not about having the skills. It's about having the heart. The strength to make decisions that will change lives. To choose what's right, even when the world tells you otherwise. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time since he'd met her, John wondered if she was right. Could he truly be the one to lead a people he had never met before? Could he be the one to change the fate of an entire species? The weight of it was overwhelming, and yet, something inside him began to shift. Maybe, just maybe, he was capable of more than he had ever believed. As the night wore on, Ariana spoke of her people, the Tan Dominion, and the threat they were facing. A rival faction had risen within their ranks, one that sought to tear apart everything her people had built. Her people were on the brink of collapse, and she was their last hope. John listened carefully, absorbing every word she said. The stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he confessed, his voice low. "I never asked for any of this." Ariana reached out, her hand resting gently on his. "You are ready, John. You just need to believe in yourself. I believe in you." Her words were a quiet affirmation, but they hit him harder than any battle ever had. He was starting to realize that the real battle wasn't just about defeating enemies or protecting Ariana, it was about understanding his place in the universe. It was about stepping up to the challenge, even when he felt small, even when he felt scared. The next morning, after a night filled with restless thoughts, John made a decision. He would stand by Ariana. He would be the man she believed he could be. Even if he didn't understand it all yet, even if the road ahead was uncertain, he would walk it with her. He had to. For her. For her people. For himself. And maybe, just maybe, he could become the leader he never thought he could be. The following days were filled with uncertainty, and yet, with each passing moment, John felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The uncertainty of his role, the burden of responsibility, he wasn't sure he was ready for any of it. But there was no turning back. Ariana was relying on him, and so were her people. They traveled from safe house to safe house, sometimes staying for days, sometimes just a few hours, always on the move, always watching for any sign of danger. Each night, the two of them would sit together, and Ariana would tell him more about her people, their culture, their struggles. And each night, John would listen, trying to absorb everything she said. The Tan Dominion was a vast empire, spanning dozens of planets, but it was fragile. Rival factions were threatening to tear it apart, and the prophecy Ariana spoke of was the last hope for her people. As they sat around a small fire one evening, Ariana's voice was quieter than usual. "I know you don't understand all of this, John," she said, her eyes focused on the flames. "And I know it's a lot to take in. But you are more than just the human who freed me. You are the key to our survival." John sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't know what to say, Ariana. I'm not a leader. I've spent my life in combat, not in politics. I can't just step into this role and be what you need." Ariana turned to him, her expression soft but resolute. "You don't have to be perfect, John. You only need to be strong enough to do what's right. I know that you can lead us, even if you don't see it yet. The prophecy didn't choose you because of your skills. It chose you because of your heart." Her words struck a chord deep inside him, but he still wasn't convinced. "I'm not a hero, Ariana. I'm just a guy who did the right thing when he saw someone in need." Ariana shook her head. "That's where you're wrong, John. You are a hero. Not because you want to be, but because you choose to be." He looked at her, trying to find the words to express the doubt that still lingered in his mind. "I don't know if I can be what you think I am. I've never been anything special. Just a soldier, following orders." She reached out and placed a hand on his. "You are more than that, John. You have the strength to stand up for what's right. You have the courage to fight for a future, even when the odds are against you. That's all we need." The sincerity in her eyes made him believe her, even if he didn't fully believe in himself. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about doing what needed to be done. The next morning, they set out again, this time to meet with a group of rebel leaders who were supposedly sympathetic to Ariana's cause. As they walked through the bustling streets of the city, John's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He couldn't help but wonder what would happen when they reached the rebels. Would they trust him? Would they believe in him? Would they be willing to follow a human? Ariana's presence was a steadying force at his side, but even her calm demeanor couldn't ease the tension in his chest. They arrived at a small, discreet building nestled in a quieter part of the city. The air felt thick with anticipation as they entered, and John could sense the eyes of the rebels on him. Ariana spoke first, her voice calm but firm. "We are here to discuss the future of the Tan Dominion. We need your help, and we need it now." The room was silent, the rebel leaders exchanging wary glances. Finally, one of them spoke. "And why should we trust you? You're a human. What makes you think we'll follow a human?" John stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "Because I'm not here to conquer you. I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to help. Ariana and I, we're fighting for the same thing. For freedom. For a future where we don't have to live in fear. And if you'll let me, I'll fight for that future, alongside you." The words felt heavy, but as he spoke them, something inside him began to shift. Maybe he wasn't just a soldier anymore. Maybe he was becoming something more. The room was still, the air thick with tension, but then, slowly, the leader of the rebels nodded. "You have our attention, human. We'll listen to what you have to say." John couldn't help the small sigh of relief that escaped him. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. And for the first time since he had met Ariana, he began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could be the leader she saw in him. As the days passed, John and Ariana worked closely with the rebel leaders, strategizing and discussing plans to unite the fractured factions of the Tan Dominion. John still felt like an outsider in this world of politics and power, but he was slowly beginning to see how much his presence mattered. Ariana, ever the calm and collected force, continued to guide him, offering advice and wisdom when needed. Yet, even she couldn't shake the weight of the situation. The Tan Dominion was on the brink of collapse, and time was running out. Their enemies were closing in, and the prophecy Ariana had spoken of was the only thing keeping hope alive. One evening, after a long day of meetings, John and Ariana sat alone in a quiet corner of the rebel safe house. The flickering light of a small fire cast dancing shadows on the walls as they shared a rare moment of peace. Ariana was lost in thought, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup, and for a moment, John didn't speak. He knew better than to interrupt her when she was deep in contemplation. Finally, she looked up, her violet eyes meeting his. "You're starting to understand it now, aren't you?" she asked softly. John nodded, though his mind was still processing everything. "I'm beginning to," he admitted. "I don't know if I'll ever fully understand it, but I see why I'm here. It's not about me. It's about all of us." Ariana smiled, a small but genuine expression. "You're not just here because of fate, John. You're here because of the choices you've made. The decisions you've already made that have led us this far. You may not see it yet, but you've already become the leader we need." Her words hit him harder than he expected, and he looked down, trying to make sense of them. He wasn't sure he was ready to be a leader, but Ariana had a way of making him believe in himself, even when he didn't. "I never thought of myself as a leader," John said, his voice low. "I'm just a guy who stumbled into this mess." Ariana placed a hand on his, a simple gesture, but one that conveyed more than words ever could. "You're exactly what we need. You're human, and you have something we've lost. You have the heart to fight for something more, something beyond just survival." John felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: Ariana believed in him. And somehow, that made all the difference. The next few days were a blur of planning and organizing. John worked tirelessly with the rebels, learning more about the enemy they were facing and the resources they had at their disposal. They needed allies, and they needed them fast. Ariana had emphasized the importance of rallying the different factions, but John knew it wasn't going to be easy. Trust had to be earned, and that wasn't something that happened overnight. But they had no time to waste. They couldn't afford to wait for things to fall into place. One afternoon, John and Ariana stood at the edge of a small balcony, overlooking the city below. The streets were bustling with activity, but the tension in the air was palpable. The enemy was closing in, and everyone knew it. "We have to act now," John said, his voice steady despite the unease creeping up inside him. "We can't keep waiting for the right moment. If we wait too long, it will be too late." Ariana nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I agree," she said softly. "But we must be careful. One wrong move, and everything we've worked for will fall apart." John turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "And what about you? What's your role in all of this?" Ariana met his gaze, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something deep and unspoken. "My role is to guide," she said quietly. "But it's you who will lead them." The weight of her words sank in, and for the first time, John realized just how much was riding on him. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of something bigger, something that would shape the future of the Tan Dominion. And no matter how scared he felt, no matter how unprepared he thought he was, he couldn't back down now. With a deep breath, he turned back toward the city. "Then let's make sure we're ready. The time for hesitation is over." Ariana smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "Then let's begin." The tension in the air had reached a boiling point. As John stood with Ariana, watching the gathering of rebel forces, he realized just how much was at stake. The meeting with the factions had been tense, but something about the way they all looked to him now, some with doubt, some with hope, made him realize that his journey had taken a turn. He wasn't just following orders anymore. He was the one giving them. It had only been a few days since their first real test as allies, but the weight of leadership was already bearing down on him. Ariana had been a steadying force at his side, but even she couldn't deny that their time was running out. "You did well today," Ariana said, her voice soft as they walked along the quiet street toward their safe house. "The rebels, they're starting to trust you." John's gaze remained ahead, his mind racing. "I don't feel like I'm earning their trust. I just feel like I'm making it up as I go." Ariana smiled, a slight but genuine expression. "That's the first step to becoming a leader, John. You're not supposed to have all the answers. What matters is that you're willing to lead, even when you don't know what's coming next." Her words, though comforting, didn't quite ease the weight he felt. He had always been good at following orders, not giving them. This was new. This was terrifying. They arrived at the safe house, a small, hidden building tucked away in the quieter part of the city. The moment they stepped inside, John was met with the familiar sight of maps and strategic plans scattered across the table. He had gotten used to the late nights, poring over intel and discussing next moves with the rebel leaders. But tonight, the room felt different. The atmosphere was thick with the promise of something bigger. He was no longer just helping to fight a war, he was fighting for the survival of an entire species. "We don't have much time," said one of the rebel commanders, his voice grave. "The enemy is closing in on us. We need to strike before they have a chance to finish what they've started." John nodded, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He could feel the pressure of every eye in the room on him now. "What's the plan?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. Ariana stepped forward, her confidence radiating. "We've arranged for a diversion. The main force will attack the enemy's supply lines. It won't be enough to take them out completely, but it'll buy us time." John's mind raced as he absorbed the details. "What about the civilians? We can't just let them get caught in the crossfire." Ariana's eyes softened. "The civilians will be moved to safe locations. We'll ensure that no one gets left behind." John's gut tightened. "And if something goes wrong? What's our backup plan?" Ariana looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You're the backup plan, John." Her words were simple, but they hit him like a punch to the chest. He wasn't sure if he was ready to be anyone's backup. He had already made the decision to help them, to stand by Ariana, but this was different. He was the last line of defense now. If the rebels failed, if the diversion didn't work, it would fall on him to save them. "You've already proven that you're capable," Ariana said softly, almost as if she could read his mind. "You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be strong." He nodded, the weight of his responsibilities heavy on his shoulders. "All right," he said, swallowing hard. "Let's get to work." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. John worked tirelessly with the team, double-checking the plans, coordinating with the rebels, making sure every detail was in place. When the time came, he stood at the front of the group, Ariana by his side, ready to face whatever was coming. As they moved out into the night, John could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain: he was no longer just a man caught in the middle of someone else's war. He was part of something much bigger, and for better or worse, he was ready to lead. As the rebel forces began to move out under the cover of night, John felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. He wasn't just a soldier anymore, he was the leader of a group of people who were counting on him to guide them through the chaos. The mission was set: the diversion would draw the enemy's attention away from their main target, giving the rebels a chance to hit the enemy's supply lines and take back control. But no one was under any illusion about the risks involved. There was no guarantee the plan would succeed, and every step forward felt like walking on the edge of a blade. As they made their way through the darkened streets, John's thoughts drifted to Ariana. She had been a rock for him, guiding him through this strange, overwhelming new world. But tonight, it was his turn to guide. He glanced at her, walking confidently by his side, her violet eyes scanning their surroundings with the sharpness of a seasoned leader. "Ready?" Ariana asked quietly, her voice steady and reassuring. John gave her a quick nod, though his mind was a swirl of doubt. "I have to be," he said, more to himself than to her. They reached the staging area, a quiet alleyway where the rebel forces gathered, waiting for the signal. John took a deep breath, trying to steady the nervous energy pulsing through him. It felt like the calm before a storm. He could see the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty, but also something else: trust. They were trusting him to lead them through this, and that thought alone made his heart race with both fear and determination. He addressed the group, trying to mask the uncertainty in his voice. "This is it," he said. "We've trained for this. We've planned for this. We're doing this for our future, for our families, and for our people. Keep your focus. Stay sharp. We do this together." The rebels nodded, their faces set with resolve. As the signal came through, John moved quickly into position, his heart hammering in his chest. The streets were eerily quiet now, the usual sounds of the city muffled by the tension that hung in the air. Ariana was close behind him, her presence a quiet strength. "We'll stick to the plan," she said, her tone calm. "Just stay close, and we'll make it through this." John nodded, feeling her confidence seep into him. As they moved through the shadows, he couldn't help but notice how different this felt from anything he had ever done before. It wasn't about fighting a war, it wasn't about following orders, it was about protecting the people who believed in him. The mission was dangerous, no doubt. But it was their only shot. Soon, they reached the enemy's position. The diversion had worked. The enemy was distracted, and the rebels had a chance to strike. John looked to Ariana, who gave him a small nod. This was it. He signaled to the team, and they moved in, swiftly and quietly. The quiet tension was replaced with the sound of hurried footsteps and whispers. John's heart raced, his pulse pounding in his ears, but he kept his focus. They had to move fast. As they infiltrated the enemy base, John could feel the gravity of the moment. His mind was clear, focused on the task at hand. They planted the explosives with precision, each member of the team working together like a well-oiled machine. And then, as the countdown began, John felt a surge of adrenaline. The base would be crippled. The rebels would have their chance. But as they moved to retreat, something unexpected happened. A loud alarm blared, and the enemy forces began to mobilize faster than they had anticipated. John's heart skipped a beat. "We're not out yet," he muttered, urgency creeping into his voice. "Get to the exit, now." Ariana was right behind him, her presence a steadying force as they moved through the base, evading enemy patrols. The seconds felt like hours, and John's breath came in ragged gasps. He wasn't sure how much longer they could keep this up, but he knew one thing for sure: they couldn't afford to fail now. They reached the exit, and just as they were about to make their escape, an enemy soldier appeared in their path. Without thinking, John shoved Ariana out of the way, stepping forward to face the soldier. The moment hung in the air like a delicate thread about to snap. But before anything could happen, another figure emerged from the shadows, taking down the soldier in one swift move. John's heart skipped again, but this time it was a relief. The rest of the rebel forces had arrived. They were safe. For now. The escape was nothing short of chaotic, but somehow, they had made it out. John's heart was still racing as he and Ariana took shelter behind a row of dilapidated buildings, the faint hum of distant alarms filling the air. The rebel forces had joined them just in time, and together, they managed to slip away unnoticed, but that didn't mean they were safe. John knew they couldn't rest yet. They were not out of danger. Ariana, ever composed, glanced around, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "We've made it this far," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "But we need to move fast. The enemy will send reinforcements, and we can't afford to be caught." John nodded, his mind still trying to catch up with the speed of events. He had always been a soldier, but this felt different. There was something more personal about this fight. The stakes weren't just survival, they were about something bigger. Something that would change the future of the Tan Dominion. "Where do we go next?" he asked, trying to steady his breath. Ariana met his gaze, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "We need to regroup with the main force. We have a small window of time before they catch up to us. If we can reach the safe house in the next few hours, we'll be able to plan our next move." The urgency in her voice spurred him into action. He had never been part of anything so high stakes, but he wasn't about to back down now. He was in this until the end. "Let's go," he said, setting off toward the narrow streets that led to their next destination. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual hustle and bustle of the city replaced by a tense stillness. The sounds of their footsteps echoed off the walls as they moved swiftly through the shadows. John stayed close to Ariana, his senses heightened, every creak of the building or distant noise making him pause. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they approached the safe house, a familiar sense of dread settled in his chest. They had reached the entrance when the unmistakable sound of footsteps came from behind them. John froze. "We're not alone," he whispered, his heart pounding. Ariana motioned for him to stay still, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows. Then, in a fluid motion, she turned to face the approaching figures. The tension in the air thickened as they realized they were surrounded by enemy soldiers, their dark armor blending into the night. John's mind raced. They couldn't afford to fight there. Way out. Not now. Not with the mission so close. Ariana's voice broke the silence, calm and commanding. "We don't need to fight," she said, her gaze steady on the soldiers. "We just need to get through them." The soldiers hesitated, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. John couldn't understand why they hadn't attacked yet, but he wasn't about to question it. They had no time to waste. He followed Ariana's lead, moving swiftly to the side, staying in the shadows as they weaved through the enemy's line of sight. The soldiers seemed momentarily distracted, unsure of how to proceed, giving John and Ariana the precious seconds they needed to slip past them. They moved faster now, the adrenaline pumping through John's veins, but his thoughts remained focused on the mission. They had to get to the safe house. They had to make it through this night. The soldiers still followed them, but they were now a step behind. As they reached the door of the safe house, Ariana pushed it open, ushering John inside before quickly closing it behind them. They had made it. For now. John leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. They were safe. At least for the moment. Ariana turned to him, a small, satisfied smile on her face. "We've bought ourselves some time," she said. "But this is just the beginning." John nodded, his heart still racing. This was only the start of a much bigger battle. But now, more than ever, he knew he couldn't turn back. He was in this fight for the long haul, and he would do whatever it took to see it through to the end. The safe house was quieter than it had ever been. The only sound was the soft hum of the hidden ventilation system and the occasional rustling of papers as rebel leaders and strategists worked in the background, finalizing their plans. John stood near the window, looking out at the night sky. The stars above seemed so far away, yet somehow, they felt closer now than ever before. He had come so far in such a short time. The man who had once only known war was now a leader in a fight for survival. He wasn't sure how it had happened, or even if he was ready for it, but one thing was clear: there was no turning back. Ariana entered the room quietly. Her presence almost a whisper. "You're still up," she said, her voice soft but filled with understanding. John turned to face her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "Not with everything happening. Not with what's coming." Ariana nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I know. The pressure is overwhelming. But you're doing exactly what needs to be done, John. We're one step closer to turning the tide." He sighed and leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair. "I don't feel like I'm doing enough. I don't know if I can make the right decisions." Ariana stepped closer, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that he had come to rely on. "You've already made the right decision," she said firmly. "You're here. You're standing with us, fighting for the future. That's all any of us can do." John was silent for a moment, taking in her words. It wasn't that he doubted her, he trusted her more than anyone. But the responsibility felt so heavy. How could he lead a people he barely knew? How could he fight for a future that felt so distant, so fragile? But as he looked at her, he realized something. He wasn't alone in this. He had allies. He had friends. And most importantly, he had Ariana. She wasn't just the oracle of her people, she was his rock, the one who believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. "Thank you," he said quietly. Ariana smiled, a small, reassuring smile. "It's not me you should thank," she replied. "It's you. You're the one who made the choice to stand up. That's what makes you a leader." John nodded slowly, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. For the first time in days, he felt like he could breathe. There was still so much to do, so much uncertainty ahead, but he was ready. They both were. As dawn began to break, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, John and Ariana stood together, looking out at the world beyond. The fight was far from over, but they had made it through the night. And together, they would face whatever came next. With the rebels at their side and the strength of their conviction, they were ready to change the future. No matter what it took.